There are two types of aspiring podcasters, those who know exactly what they're getting into and those who have no idea what they're getting into and they just want to get after it. A lot of people don't realize it, but podcasting is way less competitive than Instagram, than Facebook, than TikTok, even boring ass LinkedIn. Now look, I love podcasting. I love hosting podcasts. I love producing podcasts, but it can be a total beast if you want to do it right. There's just a lot of things we don't know going into it that we wish we did. And even though podcasting is a great opportunity, there's 4 things you need to know before you start one. And if you're watching this and you already have one, definitely leave your comments in case I leave something out. Now, the very first thing you need to know is that podcasting is not really algorithmic. It hurts to even say that word, but look, if you're a creator right now, do you ever feel like you're just chasing the algorithm endlessly on social media trying to catch some heat on your content? And you know what? You probably should be, because on social media, the algorithm is king, but not in podcasting. There is no real algorithm, so gaming the game is not that easy. So let's think about this a bit. People can't like your podcast, they can't comment on your podcast, and they can't necessarily share your podcast because it's not visual. Unless we're talking a video podcast on YouTube, which is a little bit different. A regular podcast on an audio only platform, you can't do any of those things. And that definitely factors into my decision. I don't know about you, but if I see a post with a lot of likes, a lot of views, a lot of shares, I might watch more of it than I normally would, and I might engage with it as well. And all that stuff triggers the algorithm to show it to more people. It's not like that in podcasting. Your podcast isn't getting shown to more people at all unless you are doing something about it. And this means sharing it on social media, whether it's with clips or images or posts, any of that stuff. It means people are sharing it for you, meaning people are saying, hey, Rich's podcast is amazing. You gotta go listen to this episode on why podcasts fail. Those types of things. So it's a lot of word of mouth. And the only other 2 ways that it would be getting shown to other people is if you happen to be on Apple or Spotify charts, or if you are ranking on Chartable. And some of this is either going to happen organically or you're paying to be visible like a banner or your cover art at the top of a page. Now, it's really hard to kind of tell you how to appear on Apple and Spotify rankings because they don't tell you how that happens. There's 3 things that definitely factor into ranking that I know of for sure. And the first is going to be subscriber velocity. So they look at every 2 to 3 days and see how many people have subscribed. This is why when a podcast can launch, that if you have a good launch plan or you paid for a lot of exposure or did a giveaway or something like that, you could rank almost off the bat even with just a couple episodes because a lot of people subscribed. The second one is going to be downloads. Now, downloads are complete BS a lot of the times. As a matter of fact, Apple and Spotify are now not IAB certified. IAB is essentially just a third party that organizes the way downloads are actually measured, so there's no BS going on there. Apple and Spotify are like, we'll just kind of do our own thing. So the numbers are really unpredictable, but downloads do play a factor, but it's unreliable, and that's why you're gonna see differences on Apple's charts and Spotify's charts. Now, retention is the third thing that plays a potential factor in charting or ranking, and retention is simply how much the average person is consuming of that podcast episode. We love a baseline of 75%. We have clients who are in the high 80s, some in the low 90s, believe it or not, which is insane. Retention, however, is measured by these platforms, and it will play a factor in whether you are appearing and ranking or not. One thing I could tell you for a fact, and Apple even says so, is that ratings and reviews don't mean they don't. Apple says it, it doesn't matter. That's just something that looks good, it feels good. I'm not saying they're not worth it, but that does not play a factor in whether you're gonna be ranking or showing up in people's podcast feeds. So look, what I'm trying to tell you is there's gonna be a lot of old school marketing here. And it might not be comfortable, but you're gonna have to promote your podcast in a lot of old school ways. The second thing I wish I knew is that the gear doesn't matter. The cameras, the mics, the software, the recording devices. I mean, there's so many things that go into podcasting that I now realize don't matter. Now, I love gear as much as the next person, but it could get crazy expensive and it could get totally overwhelming if you're iffy with tech like I am. But so many people who get into podcasting want to get gear right away, want to make an elaborate set, and I deal with this all the time. Like, we have a media company and everyone likes to focus on that stuff, but it's not as important as the content. And the reason I know that is because unless you sound super awful, people are not going to care that much. Let's be real for a second. Any podcast that you listen to right now, do you go back and listen to it and think to yourself, The sound quality of this podcast is just so amazing. Like, I will never stop listening. Not once have you said that. And maybe if it's on YouTube, you saw the quality and you love the quality, but it's not going to be that as much as it is the substance, the conversations, and the content itself. When I talk about content or substance, it usually falls into what I like to think of as one of the 4 E's. I can't do it. Empowering, entertaining, educational, or encouraging. So just remember, content is the main course, not audio and video. Now real quick, if you want to look at gear, we have videos on good, better, and best packages, things that our clients use, things that we use. That will be in the description below, so you could check that out if you're looking for different gear, different price points. Now the next one is gonna make impatient people mad, and trust me, I'm as impatient as they come. Growing a podcast audience is agonizingly slow. We already know there's no algorithm. We already know you got to do a lot of old school marketing and promoting. Now you have to factor in that less people are listening to podcasts than they are watching and scrolling through social media. But I promise you, this is not a bad thing. People go to social media for decompressing content, right? You're just going to be mindless. You don't want to think about the trouble you're having in your relationship. You don't want to think about your work. You don't want to think about the bills you have to pay. You go to decompress. When people go to podcasts, they are going to learn. So while a lot of people are going to social and scroll mode, a lot of people are going into podcast and listening and learning mode. What this means is a podcast audience is highly engaged. They planned on going to consume long form content. They didn't have a plan to go mindlessly scrolling from reel to reel to reel. And this makes that type of audience way more legit, way more loyal, and way more valuable if you have a product or service to sell. And you know who loves highly engaged audiences? Brands, sponsors. They know that someone with an audience of 500 podcast listeners who are highly engaged is probably a better investment than the person with 10,000 or 50,000 Instagram followers who are probably half bots and probably half people who don't actually see or engage with the content. Now, quick side note from my phone, if any of this has served you so far, please consider subscribing or leaving me a comment to just let me know if we're on the right track and giving you what you want. And obviously you can hit me up with any questions you might have. Now, the last thing is the best thing, and it has to do with this right here. You don't need to be on video, which means if you want to record in your underwear on the couch next to a bowl of cereal, feel free to do so, because you can do an audio only podcast. And of course we got you, so if you want to make an audio podcast and you want to do it step by step, we made a video right here for you. Now, discoverability for podcasts is enormous on YouTube right now because of video podcasts, but if you can get some repetitions in on an audio only podcast, not worrying about lights, not worrying about cameras and lenses, not worrying about the backdrop or anything like that, this is going to actually probably speed your confidence up in a major way. There is such an amount of reduced pressure, and there's so much more kind of logistics. You literally just need to play it back. You don't need to edit it. You don't need to watch it on a video software. You don't need to do any of those things. You can literally just go on a walk, listen to what you recorded, and make your own observations from there. Now, my suggestion would be this: even if you plan on doing an audio only podcast for those repetitions and to become a better host faster, I would still have a camera or a phone recording you so you could kind of determine your mannerisms and you could just see where you're uncomfortable. It's just better to have that visual sight picture of how you're delivering information, even though you know it's going to be published as audio only. Now, those are the 4 things that I hope people who are thinking about podcasting or people who are in it and not sure if they should continue can take away. Those are big factors into your longevity. And again, I'm a huge advocate of podcasting. I'm also an advocate of people not podcasting if that's not what they really want to do or enjoy. So please go ahead and check out our playlist of the rest of the videos we got in our library. I hope they're useful. And again, we have all kinds of free resources in our free resource library at richcardonamedia.com that's going to make you a better host faster.